Well, howdy again, folks. You saw the video on the first landing state park. This is a little video of the U.S. Navy activity that occurs that you can sit and watch from the beach. It is absolutely amazing if you're into the Navy. And if you are, you're going to love this. So check it out. So right off First Landing State Park, there is so much marine activity that goes on. And the first thing I noticed was the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's ship out there, and it was doing some testing of the water. I don't know what it was doing, but it was kind of cool to watch it. So one of the things you'll notice right away is there's a ton of merchant marine activity going on. Everything that goes into Chesapeake Bay has to cross the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, and it's just a tiny little area right off the state park, and every ship that goes into Norfolk or goes into Baltimore has to go through this little place. So there's always 4 or 5 or 6 ships in transit in front of the park, and it's interesting to watch, and you get some really wild ones. And I thought this was a really neat shot because here you've got all 3 things that occur on the ocean. You've got the merchant marine, pleasure craft, and there is a nuclear submarine with gunboats. And then of course, like any beach, you got the cute and you got the wacky. And here's a little 3-legged dog struggling along, but he's just happy as can be. And then of course, well, that's self-explanatory. So as many of you subscribers will already know, I've done 3 videos on some of the early Navy activity I saw. And one of the coolest things was watching the amphibious training that goes on off Fort Story. And then there was the return of the USS Baton after it had been deployed over in the Middle East. That whole battle fleet had returned, so I got to watch them come in, and that was really cool. And as the baton came out came a little tug, and then within an hour a nuclear submarine, and it was all really, really cool, and it was happening very quickly. And then of course, I was surprised how many submarines were going in and out of Chesapeake Bay almost on a daily or every other day basis. And they were almost always escorted by gunboats. It was really cool to watch. And you can watch episodes 81A, 83, and 84 if you want to see fuller details. But we saw big supply ships going out to supply the Atlantic Fleet. We saw SEAL teams swimming past. It was absolutely amazing. So as you can see, there's a lot of activity going on. And this one particular day, it all started with a destroyer coming in that you can see on the screen there. And then it was followed by the USS Kearsarge, which is a sister ship to the Baton. And these are amphibious landing ships that carry hovercraft for amphibious assaults. And then there was a huge freighter came out. Again, it resupplies the supply ships that then go over and supply the Atlantic Fleet. It's like a giant game of hopscotch, show me, for big boys. But they were passing, and the supply ships are huge, and you can just see how big the Kearsarge was in comparison as they crossed by. So the Kearsarge had been out on a 2-week deployment out in the Atlantic, practicing and doing maneuvers. So following right in behind the Kearsarge was part of its battle group, which was the USS Laboon coming in, and then going out was the USS Mason, and these are guided missile destroyers, very, very heavily armed, and they protect the big amphibious carriers and in fact the big supercarriers as well. And there are a lot of those, and they were going and coming and going all the time. Really cool to watch. So again, that same day, the USS Whidbey Island, which is again one of the assault amphibious ships, was doing maneuvers off Fort Story. And this time, instead of hovercraft, they were using the old World War II style landing craft, launching those and taking them onto shore. Obviously they're updated from World War II, but again, it was really cool to watch. And then following the Whidbey Island into Norfolk came the USS The Sullivans, again another guided missile destroyer. Then a couple days later, a destroyer came out of Norfolk, and it was followed by the Kearsarge going back out on maneuvers into the Atlantic, again for a 2-week deployment. And I guess they do classifications. It was following behind a merchant ship, and you got just a really good picture of the scale of the size of these ships. So then as the Kearsarge left, almost immediately around Fort Story, out of the Atlantic, came the USS Theodore Roosevelt, one of the big American supercarriers. I never thought I'd actually see one, and there it was. It was coming back off maneuvers, and holy smokes, is it big. And what's interesting about those is they have 90 jet fighters on them, but they all leave the ship and fly to the Oceana Naval Air Station in Virginia Beach, because they don't actually berth with jets on board because they'd be stuck. So that was kind of interesting. I didn't know that. And of course its nickname is the Big Stick, and you can see why. It is huge. And it was escorted with Coast Guard cutters and, again, unbelievably big ships. So then finally a few hours break, and the next morning, there they are again, the U.S. Navy SEAL team out for their pre-morning or pre-breakfast 10-mile ocean swim. And again, there's about 30 of them. There's a couple of kayakers looking after them. I want the job as the kayaker, but wow, what a bunch of studs those guys are. So a couple days later, I'm looking out, it's early in the morning, and out of the mist, I could see what I thought was a carrier, but I had no idea if it actually was. But as it drew closer, came around Fort Story, headed towards the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, there it was, the George H.W. Bush. And that is the newest of the supercarriers, and it was returning after a 9-month deployment in the Middle East. This was a big deal. They'd been gone for, as I said, 9 months. The jets had left, and there was a huge crowd in Norfolk ready to greet the crew when they got there. And what was interesting with this one is it had a helicopter circling it for protection, as well as the Coast Guard cutters. It was, again, these ships are just enormous, and it was a real pleasure to be able to see them. So here's some footage from the USS George H.W. Bush website, which is some film of them actually berthing after I had filmed them as they went past the First Landing State Park. So this is the actual footage from the USS George H.W. Bush, and of them actually berthing in Norfolk. And again, a big crowd. This is a big day for everybody because these folks have been gone for 9 months and they've been involved in a lot of attacks over in the Middle East and various activities that the Navy gets involved with. Pretty cool stuff. So all in all, it's pretty exciting stuff during the day, but a full moon at night on the beach, there's nothing like it.